What's up, fellow action figure collectors? Solid Dave Snake here, kicking off collection week on my YouTube channel with the action figure line that brought me back into collecting, the Jakks specific UFC action figures. And back in 2008, whenever these started coming out, I had not bought any action figures or had been collecting anything since back in the Spawn and McFarlane era, back in his heyday. And the reason why I got into these was because I was a cage fighter and a big fan of UFC and mixed martial arts, so I kind of dove right into these action figures, and I do have a complete collection of every series made, but they discontinued them after Series 9. They did a reboot for 2 series after that, and then they cut them off. So we actually haven't got a new line of UFC action figures from any other company as well. So this is it, and I actually thought I was going to be able to do this entire collection video in one video, but I'm going to have to do it in 2 parts because when I was unpacking these, it turned out to be a lot more than I remembered. So right here in part 1, we're going to go over series 0 through 4. That is everything out in front of us, and we'll move right on up here to the beginning of series 0 and start it off with the original UFC champion from UFC 1, Cheick Kongo, the one that started it all. And he was part of the UFC Legends line. In every series, they would have a legend, and they would have a fighter from either Pride or the WEC, as you can see to the right here with Miguel Torres. But it was very fitting having Cheick Kongo be that first legend. I mean, almost kind of had to. And on the back of all these packaging, and all these UFC action figures, they do have a list of the series and a little bio about the fighter. So that's pretty cool. Now, I'm not going to flip them all around, but I just thought I'd point that out. And the packaging is pretty unique on all these. You kind of have to pack them very carefully if you're storing them away, because they're not too collector friendly, all in all, with the way they are. But mine are pretty darn mint. So Cheick Kongo is the one that started it. And then we have Miguel Torres, who was part of the WEC. And even the packaging for these legends in WEC and Pride. As you can see, they have different kind of packaging. And this Miguel Torres was actually really hard to find. I never saw him in store, but these first 2 series, Series 0 and Series 1, I had ordered offline. So I got cases of both series. So that was the only way that I was able to get Miguel Torres. And I do remember about a year after this figure coming out, him going for pretty high prices on eBay. So I don't think there were too many made of him. So I'm happy to have him in my collection. And we'll keep moving on here. We have Kendall Grove from UFC 69 in the upper left-hand corner. It has which UFC the figure is based off of. And he actually comes with a mask that he came out for in that fight. And we'll move on to Houston Alexander from UFC 71. And then we have Frank Mir from UFC 92. And one of his competitors here, Brock Lesnar from UFC 81. I remember him shooting up in value. And we have the Dean of Mean, Keith Jardine, from UFC 89. And then we have Rashad Evans from UFC 88. Chuck Liddell from UFC 79. Forrest Griffin from UFC 76. And then we have, from the Legends line of Series 1, Evan Tanner, who passed away way too young. I used to love to watch him fight. It was sad to see him go. And then we have Series 1's Pride fighter, Kevin Randleman, the Monster. And continuing with Series 1, we have Cheick Kongo from UFC 75. Michael Bisping from UFC 83. Mike Swick from UFC's Fight for the Troops. Anderson Silva from UFC 82. Nate Marquardt, and that's from UFC 88. And we are in Series 2 now, starting with Nate Marquardt. And Series 2 was only 3 figures instead of the 8 that were in Series 0 and the 8 that were in Series 1. Then we have Antonio Minotauro Nogueira from UFC 81. And then the WEC fighter for Series 2, Mike Brown from WEC 36. I believe that's when he dethroned Uriah Faber at featherweight. Then moving on to Series 3, we have another Pride fighter, Mauricio Shogun Hua from Pride 33 Second Coming. And then we had 2 legends in Series 3. We have Chuck Liddell from his debut at UFC 17. I love that Chuck with him screaming. Even has the wrestling shoes on. Back when you could do that in the UFC. Wear them. And Mark Coleman from UFC 11. The grandfather of ground and pound. And that head sculpt is horrible for him. And continuing with Series 3, we have Cairo Parisien from UFC 78. John Fitch from UFC 94. Thiago Silva from UFC 75. BJ Penn from UFC 84. And he comes with the championship belt. And then moving on to Series 4, we have the legend from the series, Don Frye from UFC 8. And then this one is very special to me. The WEC pack for Series 4 was Jamie Varner. And whenever I was fighting, I was training for a title fight. I actually went out to Arizona Combat Sports out in Tempe, Arizona, where he trains, and got to train with him for a whole month before my title fight. And I believe he was training for Shane Roller in his last fight for the WEC, so he wrote a little note on there and gave it his signature. Said, "Thanks for all the support, Jamie Varner." So that was really cool. Great fighter. Learned a lot from him. And then moving on, we have Sean Shirk. One of my personal favorites, Matt Hughes from UFC 98. Sean Shirk was also from UFC 98. Then we have Rich Franklin from UFC 99. Vanderlei Silva from UFC 84. And one that probably shouldn't have even got a figure made. He did so bad in the UFC, but we got Kimbo Slice from The Ultimate Fighter Season 10. So, alright guys, that will wrap up the first 5 series of UFC action figures by Jakks Pacific. And stay tuned because I will be right back with the second part of this video.